Welcome, welcome. Dr. Stephen Hobbs here from the Wealth Movement, and you're joining us today for the Wellther series. And Wellthers are people that I see and hear and taste and touch who have really wonderful insights and ideas about business and life. And I reach out to them and say, hey, listen, let's have a conversation. And when they agree, we jump on Zoom and we have a conversation. And in this case, I have Daniel Aaron with me, and he said that he'd like to have 3 conversations. And I went, yes, okay, let's have this. Let's have a bit of fun. And so with that, I'd just like to share a little bit about how I've come to meet Daniel, and then I'm going to ask him to introduce himself in more context for where he'd like to take our conversation over the next 3 times that we meet. The key for me is that I met him and had such wonderful conversations, sort of weaving in and out about life and business. And he was describing the businesses that he's had. I was doing the same thing. And then we got talking about different life elements. And we share a commonality in that we're both looking at gearing up, finding ways to create what some people might call an institute, an educational institution, to be able to share what we know with the world and to be for the world. And I just so enjoyed those conversations. I said, hey, we're jumping on. And he says, great. And so we're here today. And with that, I'm just going to ask Daniel, just share a little bit more about who you are so that people can get an appreciation for what's unfolding in your life.
Great. Well, thank you, Stephen, and thanks for having me here. I'm really happy to get connected and further our conversation. Who I am currently is a teacher, coach, father, yogi, astrologer. How I got here was, well, 2 things I can say about that. One is I grew up in a very sad situation, which meaning the standard American diet, and I mean diet on the level of food, media, the situation that is America, and that's what I grew up in, and it was sad on the emotional level. Though also, I was lucky in that from the earliest days, there was part of me that knew there's more. There's got to be more to life than just getting by. And then promptly I forgot all that and just dealt with surviving childhood to the point that I was, on track for being a, standard American normal person trying to achieve and create until in my mid-20s, I had what you could call a spiritual awakening, except for that sounding a bit pompous, I think. Another way of saying it is my whole life got shaken up, or although I didn't have any sense of God or religion, I was agnostic up until that point. Part of how I describe it now and what it feels like is like God reached down, grabbed me by the hair before I was shaving it, and pulled me awake and said, hey, look, there's more to life than what you've been seeing. And from that moment on, I just got obsessed with learning how to master this being human, how to be in the world, though not of it, in the words of Jesus. And happily, mastery of that is something that is ongoing. So that's what I have been about, and that's what I do is experiment and learn and grow for myself, and then with hundreds and now thousands of students and clients to help them to create what they want in their lives.
And one of the things that we share is that we both had experiences of living and working overseas. And can you just share a little bit about where you were when you were working outside of America?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, the first time I left the continental U.S. was, when I left the U.S., when I left North America was when I was young, I think still in my 20s, I went to Spain for a relationship. I was in love, and I went there, and that didn't work out. We broke up almost immediately after. What I realized, though, was there's a big world out there. It's possible to live in other places. And where I had always felt like I don't fit in the US, well, over there, I wasn't supposed to fit in. So that felt like a relief. And from then on, actually, most of my life has been overseas up until recently. I returned to the US. The last 13 years, I was living in Bali, and I created a center there, and I led lots of trainings and events there. And it was a really powerful period in my life. So that said, I'm very, actually, strangely happy to be back here in the US now. When I came back, it's been, I think, over a year now. A lot of people said, what are you doing? Everybody else is trying to get out of here now. And yet, strangely, I felt and still feel that there is some reason for me to be here, a calling to be here now.
So I would think you would agree, and if you would like to add comment to it, is that working outside of your country, being able to see other ways of life is an important element about being for the world, about jumping in and understanding your business and your life in different ways. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think it's invaluable to me, spending time and a significant period, not just a trip, but really like living in another culture, I think is so important. It's really easy for us to get nationality centric and to think this is the way it is. And, for those of us that are involved in education and helping other people to get the automatic broadening that happens when we're in the midst of another language, another culture, to understand how other people operate. It's just so valuable and so enriching too.
Yeah, I would agree because it gives you a different feel, different perspective of what's going on. And I know a word that you've used many times is the word congruence or congruency. And I know we talked about that in terms of our overseas experiences, and which is what drew us together in many ways to start off with. But as it's been unfolding, can you just explain a little bit more about congruency? Because I always enjoy hearing what you've got to say about it, and I keep learning something each time. So I'm going to start there with congruency. Where are we going with that?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's funny when you say it that way. That last part sparks something for me. Where are we going with that? And part of my own background is informed by the study and practice of yoga, among other perspectives. And one of the things, yoga is so popular now, and one of the things that many people know about yoga is its definition, which is oneness or yoking or coming together. It's the realization that, in fact, we are the same. There's this persistent illusion that there is separation between beings, and yet on a spiritual level we know that that's illusory, that we are all one. And while that illusion is so persistent, the knowledge that of the truth of oneness, that's where we're going. Though more often when I'm talking about it in terms of, with teaching or working with coaching clients, it's because so many of us experience, at least in times in our life, the opposite of congruency, which is division or splits. One of the biggest ones that I see is between work and personal. And I struggled with that, especially in my early business days too, trying to keep them separate and, have boundaries in my personal life. And one of the things I realized is, well, it was a lot of work and artificial, and it didn't work anyway. So more and more what I attempt for myself and work with clients on too is the freedom and power and relaxation that comes from simply being ourself, no matter what the circumstances are. So there are a couple forms of congruency. One more that I'll offer is, I think, the biggest, I don't know if it's the biggest, but one of the most common and deadly, I don't know if it's deadly, but painful challenges I see for people is the incongruency of one's values or spiritual life with their daily activities or work. And again, any kind of division tears at us and hurts on some level. So a lot of my work for myself, and again with those that I get to help, is to learn how to create those things to be the same, so that we're living on a daily basis what's really important and true for us. Does that make sense?
It does, and to just take that a step further, I know when I introduced, I said, business and life, and one could say, oh, hang on, we're separating those. They're more like placeholders in some ways, just to get things rolling, because life has all different elements. I talk about, health and wellness. I talk about leisure and recreation, philanthropy and volunteerism, work and contribution. And those are like 4 elements of life, all right? So the congruence piece about bringing that together, that is an essential element of living an extraordinary life, as I call it. And I'm just going to put you on the spot, because folks, I didn't prep anything, because I like to just let this free flow. But what would be one sage piece of advice that you could offer all of us about this congruency in life? Something that you would go, yeah, I can wrap my head around that. I think I can wrap my actions around that. What would be that one sage piece of advice you'd give to us?
Okay, well, the first thing that comes to me is something that we can all practice, and it's not necessarily an easy thing, well, at least not up until the point that it is. And it's something that I work with frequently, and that is the difference between who I am on the inside and who I appear to be. And I'll see if an example comes to me. It happens with some frequency in my own life that I realize that I'm saying something or doing something or writing something because I want to be seen in a certain way, because I want to appear a certain way. And I think of one of the messages that a lot of us grew up with, especially in the US and really all around the world in this modern day, the idea of being someone. Like, you gotta be somebody, you gotta achieve, which of course, from the spiritual perspective, is bolstering of the ego, puffing ourselves up to, um, appear in a certain way. And so I guess the simplest practice there is just to catch ourselves when I'm doing this to appear, to be seen in a certain way. And when that happens, to just then step back and actually restrain, stop doing that thing, and take a breath into saying, you know what, I'm fine as I am. Not only that, I'm perfect as I am. So let me just be congruent with myself. Let me be real.
And you used the phrase there, the frequency of life. So I think you're seeking that frequency of congruence that is congruent about who you are, rather than the frequency of an external identity. So I'm thinking frequency, I'm just picking this up, I'm thinking frequency is another word that has some importance that you've woven into your life. Can you unpack frequency for us at this point?
Well, yeah, I'll certainly give it my best shot. It's a
Okay.
word. It's when I started teaching and coaching 20 something years ago, if I talked about vibration or frequency, it was a little new agey, woo woo kind of sounding. And the way things have developed now, it's a normal conversation. The way neuroscience and metaphysics has evolved, people know that everything is frequency, everything is a vibration. You, me, the computer with which I'm talking to you on right now, the chair that I'm sitting on, it's all just a vibration. And a lot of my own work, I don't know how to say work, my own practice, my own remembering is to approach things more from a frequency perspective rather than the manipulation of physical matter. And as I say that, it sounds very woo-woo to me. um, what I mean by that, well, it's a little bit like the quotation we've all heard before from Einstein, that we can't solve a problem by the same level of consciousness that created it. So a lot of my practice and work is to break patterns and shift out of, it's so easy to get locked into this way of being, which another way of saying it is this frequency. So sometimes to, disrupt the pattern and approach things with a different frequency.
So that would lend itself, if we're thinking about frequency of identity that gets us a little stuck, there would be then the frequency of vision. Like
Yeah.
setting up a vision for oneself and seeing what that frequency might be, so that when you are living it and living, I call it living from it, then vision would be a really important piece of this question about congruency and frequency. I'm just going with your train of thought. Would that be fair?
Thank you. I like it. I appreciate that. Well, yeah, and what comes to me as you say that is, let's see, how do I want to say this? There's a seductively common approach to life, especially in the business world, and especially amongst people like us. Tell me if I'm including you here. We might call achievers, people who are driven, who want to create and do and make a difference. And I'm not disrespecting any of that at all. I appreciate that about myself, and people that have achieved and created a lot in the world, we owe a great debt to. And there is, especially in my background, coming from the yoga world in some way, there's a lot of emphasis on discipline, and which is often translated, and I'd say mistranslated, as getting ourselves to do things that we don't want to do, pushing ourselves in some way. And for me, the greatest discoveries in the last bunch of years, and one of the things I'm most grateful for about the way my own work has evolved, is I used to be much more pushy. In the transformative work or transformative event industry, there's a type of teaching or work with people that's called transformation by perturbation. In other words, that what we were doing is perturbing, shaking up the people that we were working with, which came out of the 70s, and it was an appropriate step in some way. It was very confrontational and primal therapies, and really breaking people down. And I kind of grew up with that, and I got a lot out of it. And my own work was like that for some time. And what I've been coming to more and more all the time is that rather than pushing, what I am interested in for myself and for all of us is pulling or inspiring or drawing forward. And that's largely done through vision. So, connecting it back to what you were saying is, the more we can see what we want, see what our potential is, see what feeds our heart with some clarity. And when I say see, like you said in your introduction in the beginning, I mean see, taste, touch, imagine, feel into, hear, all of our senses. The more we can truly place ourselves into a vision that is inspiring, that is joyful, that is loving, and the more real we make that, and the more we connect with it on an emotional level, the more it's automatically drawing ourselves forward. So that vision has a frequency, it has reality to it. And the more we touch into it, the more it becomes true. And so if our lack of congruency right now is hey, I know this is possible, but this is what I'm living right now. The more time and depth we have with this, the more we are drawn toward it.
So, and I love using my hands, and I see you're doing it too. So let's go for it, okay? So really that difference between that vision and where you are now and moving, I would think that this is a great place for great questions. Because I know when I'm mentoring, one of the things I'm doing is I'm using questions, but what I'm really wanting to do is get the mentee that I'm working with to ask me questions, because their quality of their questions helps them with the quality of their life. So I'm thinking this gap that you're talking about here is really can be finessed. The congruence can come because of the questions you're asking.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's a great way of saying it. And it reminds me of one of our earlier conversations about mentoring and coaching. And to step back for a second to, I talked about the early part of my working career was pushing and or at least in part, and part of that pushing was often that I was telling or declaring or instructing in in some ways giving, in some ways giving advice to people. And more what I realize is, and it's such a relief too, is everybody has all the answers inside them already. So my job isn't to push them or steer them or get them to do anything. My job is to ask the questions that evoke their inner wisdom, the questions that help them realize where it is they want to go, to whatever their potential is here, and what's the quickest way with the most grace and ease for them. And it will be different than it is for me. And and that's part of why I say it's such a relief, is because in the early part of my work, I really tried to help people to get where they want to go in many ways by telling them how I would do it, and suggesting this. And the relief and the relaxation comes from, what, I don't have to know, and they do. It's kind of like this potential is a hologram. And we talk about vision, and it sounds like it's out there somewhere, it's in the future. And yet we also know that time is equally illusory as all this physical reality, right? So if time is illusory like that, this thing that seems like it's out there is also right here, right now, the only time it could be. So if it's like a hologram out here, our job in some way is to realize it and draw it down to this level, to bring it into the 3D world that we live in.
So that notion of finding that congruence, asking questions, find that congruence, asking questions, find that frequency, ask those questions to link with the vision, and bringing that all together is sort of like a storyline here. And for a lot of us, it's really about the re-story, right? Because I know I'm going through it right now, as I'm going through a re-story. It's not a continuation of the story I did have. This is a re-story, right? And it's bringing out a whole different way of connecting with, we'll call it spirit, right? Calling it with more connection to, in my case, I'm using nature as a place to really figure out this re-story for me, all right? This connection with spirit. And we've talked about spirit a couple of times, and I might be leading you somewhere. I don't know, but it's just the word spirit. I think you've been hinting at it. There must be something about spirit you want to unpack and just put it into play for us. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, well, and I love what you said about story and restory. And a big part of my 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 own story, the story of me, my identity is as a storyteller. And so, I'm always asking the question, well, what story do I want to invest in? Because hey, we've got all these stories available to us right now. What's the story I want to tell? What's the story I want to live. And spirit, you know, one of the modalities that's been important for me and I work with a lot is breath. And from a lot of different perspectives. I use breathing in my own practice. I use it with clients and different types of breath for different purposes. And when I was early into a training in breath work, it's a modality that's maybe therapeutic is a way of saying it, kind of breathing, very powerful. My teacher said in the midst of it that it's spiritual healing. And I was relatively new in the New Age world, though I'd been there long enough that I already had a great allergy to New Agey stuff. I was like, it just doesn't sound airy fairy. I don't like that. So when she said it's spiritual healing, I was, oh no, don't say that. I thought this was real. And what I came to realize, though, is what she said is so spot on. And, one of the things I love about breath is inhaling, right? When we inhale, one way of describing what we do is we fill up with energy, we fill up with prana, light, whatever you want to call it. And another word for that is inspiration. Like in Spanish, it's inspira. So when we inspire, we bring in spirit, we breathe in, right? And how beautiful is the connection with that word, that in life, when we are inspired, we have infinite energy, right? When, it's a new project or a new romance or whatever it is that's inspiring us, it doesn't matter if we eat or we sleep, we've just got so much energy, And then if we look at the most simple aspect of breath, it's the single determiner of whether we are dead or alive. Like, really simple, break it down. It's not breathing dead, breathing alive. So if we want to increase the quality of our life, it's bring in more spirit, increase the quality of our breath. And again, the biggest challenge about the physical world, I think whether we're conscious of it and devoted to it, whether we'd say it's a spiritual person or they're on a spiritual path, is the fundamental pain of the illusion of separation, right? Again, back to Jesus's world, we're meant to be in Jesus's words. We're meant to be in the world, but not of it. From Sanskrit, we are a jivan mukti, which is we are an infinite spirit realized as the truth, yet in a physical body. And that's the ultimate project that we are on here.
So that breathing is really taking it from the ether. Another word I will use is the field, breathing it in to inspire, to let it become part of your physical self, right? And your physical self is like the systems, because the air is really just the air. It's what our systems does with it. So there's this connection between spirit and the physical, right? Spiritual and physical, but it comes through what the mental is, the awareness, the discernment.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's great. I love what you said. And such a powerful word, discernment, right? And I think that really is the linking of the mental with this physical, spiritual, the illusion of this incongruency, right? So when we become discerning, like you said, what air do I want to breathe? What food do I want to take in? What media do I want to take in? What sort of life do I want to experience? Where do I want to put my focus? There are a zillion things I can complain about right now, and there are a zillion things that I can be grateful for right now. And what's so powerful about that level of discernment is it invokes responsibility, right? And one of the tough sells for me early on in my own sort of process and healing, going back 2.5 decades, and although I learn more about it all the time, is that I could take responsibility for my life, my body, my experience. It was so easy early on to, blame society or blame culture or blame my education or lack of, or, the fact that we didn't have money when I was a kid. Whatever, it's so easy to put the agency, the causality on the outside. And yet when we discover discernment, it automatically places agency within ourself. And I'll say just a tiny bit more, because that's easily misconstrued into self-blame. And, I wouldn't want anyone to hear what I'm saying as, well, if you don't like your life, it's your fault, you dug your grave, now you must lie. No, it's not that. It's this incredible empowerment that comes when we say, you know what, I get to choose. I get to discern. I am responsible for what I am creating. I have that power, no matter what's happened, no matter how sad or screwed up was my background, or yesterday, or 5 minutes ago. Right now, everything is possible.
So that would go back to the use of restory and questions.
Absolutely.
And to be able to, through that discernment, ask those questions that gets you to a place of, okay, maybe I do need to restory what my life is about, right? And get a different sense of a vision that I want to work from. I'm just playing with the words that we've sort of thrown out here, all right? Because words matter. I'll go on record as saying words matter, and the correct words for the correct time is really important. And so I'm just sort of weaving some of this together, and I'm sort of feeling this, the spirit conversation is really about, what we're talking about, these questions that you're asked, right? The vision that you're going to take up, the frequency you want to play with. And the other one we talked about, congruence, the sense of congruence that's necessary to have this unfold. As we sort of we're going to be moving out of our conversation for today, but is there anything you would want to share about weaving those words together? I sort of placed something out there, but any thoughts from you?
Well, one, thank you for being such a wordsmith and for championing the power of words. I'm with you. Words do matter. I've been affectionately remembering a quotation from Muhammad Ali recently, and lots of we're all complex beings, and there are parts of him that are plenty challenging. Though in his early life, one of the things he said, which I think taps into an incredible truth and incredible potential, is he said, I said that I'm the greatest boxer in the world long before I was, and long before I believed it. Right? And to me, that's just so powerful and so inspiring that he somehow had the temerity, the courage, and the foresight, the vision to know, to be able to say that, and I guess one last thing I want to say on it now is, I get excited talking about this stuff, and I'm so grateful for, for having been shaken up and, woken up in some way in my life, and for getting to play around with this kind of stuff that's beyond survival level, and to be able to work with people and help people. And for people that are, struggling with aspects of their life right now, or, not happy with the story that they're telling, I suppose there's a way that all of this can sound overly simplistic or easy. And it is worth asking, what do we want? What's our future? What kind of congruency do we want to live? And just to give my encouragement to everybody that, whatever has happened, whatever is happening, that's also part of the process and the spiritual mill that produces the gold of our life. So all of the challenges and difficulties on the physical realm are for something. It's, again, the illusion of the physical world and the persistence of problems, it's very compelling. So repetition, reminding ourselves of these truths and then putting them into practice is so important. That's what we're here for. And 9 times fail, 10 times try. The truth that we are headed for oneness, for a congruency of physical and spiritual, that's inevitable for all of us. Well, to me, that's really reassuring as a reminder. So I hope that is for the same for everybody that's listening to us.
Well, I think it is, because again, for some, it's taking their story and increasing the frequency. Others, it's a restory. I'm going to shift my frequencies, and now I'm building up a new story, and off I go. And I think it's a great reminder. And another word that goes with restory reminders, remember. And you mentioned that in your sharing here. There's a lot of power in those RE words. And one word in particular, resilience. And maybe that's something we can pick up on another time, because this conversation, this great collaborative conversation is coming to a close. So with that, is there a way that people can get a hold of you, like your website, which will have contacts and that? Can you just share your website address for us?
Yeah, super easy. It's just my name, Daniel Aaron, danielaaron.com.
DanielAaron.com. Connections and emails and that you can find there to get a hold of Daniel. And I certainly, if this is the only video you get to hear out of the series, then I encourage you to come and listen to the next ones, because we're going to be continuing on our conversations, because Daniel, I believe, has insights and ideas that are helpful for both business and life. And so with that, I'm going to sign off. Daniel, thanks very much, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you, Stephen.